Hello, and welcome to Halftime on the Hudson. I'm Corey Grip, alongside Paige Krikorian. Let's start with hot takes. Michigan should fire head football coach Jim Harbaugh. It might finally be time for Michigan football to change their pants and switch from khakis to jeans, because after Saturday's 62-39 blowout loss to rival Ohio State and head coach Urban Meyer, Jim Harbaugh should be fired. This seems to be a recurring theme with Jim Harbaugh, involving his inability to win big games, not just at the college level, but at the NFL level as well. He's 0-4 against Ohio State and 2-2 against in-state rival Michigan State since he's become head coach. And he's also lost twice in the NFC Championship game and once in the Super Bowl, despite leading a very talented San Francisco 49ers squad. He also could not dethrone the Oregon Ducks in the Pac-12 North when he was the head coach at Stanford. He was quite below average his first 3 years at Stanford, going 17-20, before going 12-1 and bolting for the 49ers. What should make Michigan fans even more upset is that Michigan has had a very talented teams and still couldn't win since he's been there. Harbaugh since he's been at Michigan, he's had 16 players drafted in the last 3 drafts, and that doesn't include defensive ends Chase Winovich, Rashawn Gary, as well as linebacker Devin Bush and safety Lavert Hill, who all likely go in the first round of the upcoming draft, with more players on the team likely to be drafted. To compare, Ohio State has had 19 players drafted in the last 3 drafts, with more to come this spring, meaning both teams are very similar in talent level. Also, despite Harbaugh supposedly being a quarterback guru, his quarterbacks have not won big games and are quite average. He has relied on transfers including Jake Rudock, Wilton Spate, John O'Korn, and now Shea Patterson, and has yet to really recruit and develop his own quarterback. He also has an excellent coaching staff led by defensive coordinator Don Brown, who's been a Power 5 defensive coordinator since 2009 and has become one of the best assistants in college football. Jim McElwain, who has a head coaching record of 44-28 at Colorado State and Florida, and has also been the OC at Alabama, is now the wide receivers coach. And Pep Hamilton, who has had offensive coaching positions all over the NFL and Stanford for the last 15 years, who's now the assistant head coach and passing game coordinator. Michigan has also brought in 3 top 20 recruiting classes, including 2 in the top 10. All of this for what? Everything seems to be going Jim Harbaugh's way, and yet he can't seem to beat Urban Meyer when it matters. Jim Harbaugh is a great coach, but he's not good enough, which is why Michigan must fire him and get rid of his $7 million contract. Another thing on the mountain of his shortcomings includes a 1-2 record in bowl games, and Michigan has yet to appear in the college football playoff or in any Big Ten championship game. He has an incredible personality and wants his players to experience the world after taking them to Europe the past 2 summers. This is all great, but when one is hired as head coach at Michigan, the #1 goal is to beat Ohio State no matter how the season is going. Some fans might even say if Michigan lost every game but the Ohio State game, it would have been a successful year. Beating Ohio State is what it's all about, but beating Michigan State is also important for state bragging rights, and Harbaugh has a combined 2-6 record against both rivals. Harbaugh was a splashy hire, but it's time to let someone else sink or swim with him, as Michigan needs to hit the reset button.
Goodbye are the days of the Cleveland Browns being an automatic W. When star wide receiver Jarvis Landry signed with the Browns, everyone questioned his decision, but maybe Landry saw what was on the horizon before anyone else. The Browns have transformed and are on full display this year. Let's start at the top. John Dorsey was brought in last year after 4 seasons in Kansas City. During his time in KC, the Chiefs had the 4th highest winning percentage in the NFL during that span. As we see today, the Chiefs are loaded and a Super Bowl pick, but a lot of the credit goes to Dorsey. He drafted All-Pro tight end Travis Kelce and All-Pro wide receiver Tyreek Hill. He's also credited with drafting breakout running back Kareem Hunt and hotshot quarterback Patrick Mahomes. Before Kansas City, he worked in the scouting department for Green Bay, where he worked closely with the GM. Oh, and he has 2 Super Bowl rings to his name, so that counts for something. Having a GM like Dorsey at the reins is the first step towards the future. In the past, Browns owner Jimmy Haslam was involved in some personnel decisions, including coaching changes, but going forward it seems Dorsey has control. After all their terrible seasons, the Browns have accumulated several draft picks which are beginning to pan out. Young talent such as Myles Garrett, Jabril Peppers, and David Njoku have significantly impacted this team. But the man leading this team is the #1 overall pick, Baker Mayfield. There was some criticism when the Browns took a chance on Mayfield with the first pick, but he has proved himself thus far. He's thrown for over 2,200 yards with 17 touchdowns. Despite firing the head coach and offensive coordinator, the Browns are 4-6-1 and have been competitive in many losses. With a vacancy in 2 major positions, Cleveland will be a destination for the next coach looking to get a chance. The Browns still have draft capital for the future, so they will only continue to build their roster. The combination of a strong GM with a talented young core make Cleveland a future spot for success.
Overtime in sports is thrilling in itself, but 7 overtimes between 2 top 25 teams in the SEC makes it all the better. When LSU traveled to College Station this past Saturday to take on the Aggies, their college football playoff chances were likely all gone, but they still had a chance to play in a New Year's Six Bowl. Those chances might have taken a hit after the all-time great game. I've seen some incredible college football games, including Deshaun Watson against Nick Saban in Alabama twice in the national championship game, the 2013 Iron Bowl, and the Chris Davis kick six, and I've witnessed some of the most fascinating shootouts in Big 12 history, but none compared to this game, even if the stakes were not as high. This game had all the layers for a legendary game, as this was the highest-scoring game in FBS history. It also had a defensive touchdown by LSU, and there was nonstop suspense involved in all 7 overtimes. It all started at the end of the 4th quarter, as Texas A&M quarterback Kellen Mond completed a pass to Kendrick Rogers to the LSU 19. And as Mond hustled to the line to spike the ball, as he spiked, the clock was hitting 0. After reviewing the play, the officials put 1 second back on the clock, and Texas A&M tied the game the very next play when Mond threw a dart to Courtney Davis for a 19-yard touchdown. Despite the craziness of the game, officiating might have made it longer than it should have been. When Mond spiked the ball at the end of the 4th quarter, there was an illegal shift, not flagged, which would have resulted in a 10-second runoff and an LSU victory. There was also an incomplete pass that should have been called a fumble, as the Texas A&M tight end that caught the ball began making a football move when the ball was punched out by an LSU safety. Controversy made this game memorable, but there were also some memorable plays. Kendrick Rogers made one of the greatest catches I've ever seen, as he had an LSU defender draped all over him. He batted the ball up in the air before snagging it with his offhand for a touchdown. What a sequence. But this game also did not allow me to go to bed or put my phone down. My eyes were glued to my phone screen, and every overtime was more exciting than the last. It also felt like it would never end because neither defense could slow down the other. This game had it all. And best of all, it was between rivals and ended another great rivalry weekend and set up the biggest weekend of the season, Conference Championship weekend.
There's been so much buzz surrounding Bryce Harper and Manny Machado during this offseason, but there is something that is getting overlooked. Teams like the Yankees, Dodgers, and Cubs keep popping up, but those teams might be reluctant to take on another mega contract. But keep your eye out for the Philadelphia Phillies, who are primed to make a big splash this offseason. The Phillies had an incredible run from 2007 until 2011, winning the division each year, and ultimately winning the World Series in 2008. The Phillies were stacked with Ryan Howard, Chase Utley, and Cole Hamels. But with time, the team began to age and slowly slipped out of contention. Between 2013 and 2017, they averaged only 69 wins a season. But during those losing seasons, they built their farm system and slowly brought up a new crop of players. Now the Phillies feature ace Aaron Nola along with the young talent of Abdul Herrera and Rhys Hoskins. They also have added veteran experience in Jake Arrieta and Carlos Santana. This past season, the Philadelphia Phillies won 80 games, and for most of the year were competing with Atlanta for the division title until they faded in September. In order to continue to rise and really take the next step up in the league, the Phillies need to land a major player such as Bryce Harper or Manny Machado. Adding either player would greatly benefit the Phillies and help them step up in contention once again. Philly would also be a good place for Harper or Machado because Citizens Bank Park, the home of the Phillies, is a hitter's park. So 2 players who hit 34 and 37 homers respectively would find comfort in this stadium. Also, to further pull them in, both have played for East Coast teams and are familiar with the area, so it would be a very fitting spot. But with a lot of strong young teams in the National League, such as the Brewers and Braves, along with the established powers of Chicago and LA, the Phillies are going to need a little something extra to take them down. In 2018, the Phillies' payroll was only $105 million, the 22nd ranked in the league. They have the financial resources to bring on a player like Harper or Machado, and are one of the few teams that can add significantly to their payroll. Signing Harper or Machado would not only bring a veteran experience into the locker room for the young guys, but also bring an all-star that can shape and transform an organization. When we return, Corey and I will be discussing college football. Stay tuned. With college football playoffs coming up within the next few weeks, Corey and I are going to discuss our thoughts and predictions. Let's start with Oklahoma versus Ohio State for the 4th spot.
I mean, it's really tough to pick between these two teams because they both have one loss. Ohio State lost to Purdue by 29, and Oklahoma lost to their biggest rival, Texas, by 3 at a neutral site. I don't know. I'm just not a big fan of the Big Ten. I think it's down this year. I think a lot of teams have underachieved. I think Michigan got exposed by Ohio State this past Saturday. I think the Big 12 is a little bit stronger. Oklahoma won road games at Iowa State. They lost to Texas in a close game. They won at West Virginia. They beat Oklahoma State. So they beat some good teams, and I think that's what should give Oklahoma the edge.
I agree with you. The Ohio State loss to Purdue really hurt them because Purdue is not a good team. But I think we saw what Ohio State could do when they beat Michigan. They blew them out. If that same Ohio State team comes to play Northwestern, they could totally make a case for 4. Oklahoma lost to Texas, so they're getting revenge by playing them in the conference championship. But no one in the Big 12 plays defense. It's only offense. So, every other team would destroy them.
Well, I think my problem with Ohio State is they really haven't played defense either. They gave up 51 points to Maryland. They almost gave up 300 rushing yards to this one, a true freshman. They struggled against Nebraska, who has been really bad this year. They didn't look great against Michigan State. They didn't look great at Penn State choked. They could have 3 or 4 losses. So I'm not going to sit up here and pretend they found ways to win, but I think a lot of that has to do with the Big Ten just not being a strong conference. But like I said, I think I agree with what you're saying. If they go into the Indianapolis and they blow out Northwestern, they could make a strong case. Because if Michigan is as good as everyone says, and they blew the doors off Michigan, I don't see why you couldn't put either. It's a hard argument. You're splitting hairs here, but both teams are neck and neck right now, and I think it's going to depend on who looks the best in the conference championship games.
Yeah, I think the conference championship game is going to be really telling. But if we're both agreeing, both teams are average, we're not really sure, could Georgia stick in at 4 and get 2 SEC teams in?
I think for Georgia to get in, they have to win. They have to beat Alabama. There's no way a 2-loss non-conference champion will get in over a 1-loss Ohio State or Oklahoma. That being said, there has been some debate, some people saying, could Georgia actually get in as a 2-loss non-champ? I don't think so, but some people think it's a possibility. Really depends on what happens in the other championship games. But I think it's possible. If Alabama loses, I think they could still get in, but it also depends on what else is going on. I think Georgia and Alabama are 2 of the 3 best teams in the country, and I think it would be a shame if either of them were left out. But the committee puts a lot of emphasis on winning conference championship games. But at the same time, Alabama got in last year, and they didn't even play in the SEC championship game. So it's really hard to determine how the committee's criteria lines up on a year-to-year basis, but I think this year it's going to be a lot trickier for Alabama to get in, especially if Ohio State and Oklahoma both win and Alabama doesn't win, even though they've been so dominant all year.
Yeah, I think Georgia would sort of be getting the short end of the stick because they've been a really great team. The SEC is really dominant compared to the Big Ten and the Big 12. But Georgia has to win or keep it really close against Alabama. They can't get blown out because then that doesn't look good. And especially if Oklahoma and Ohio State win, you can't put Georgia in. But if they keep it close with Alabama, who's probably the best team, that looks really good for them. And then if Ohio State and Oklahoma don't have really impressive wins, I could see Georgia getting in at 4.
I think listen, Georgia has all the momentum right now. They're playing really solid football. They're running the ball really effectively. And they got a chip on their shoulder. No one's giving them a chance. They're, almost 14-point underdogs. But remember, they lost to Alabama just about 9-10 months ago, almost a year to the day when they played a national championship game. A lot of those players that played in that game last year, they remember it and they want revenge. And you're going to see a hungry team out there. It's going to be close. It's going to be going down to the 4th quarter, and it will be within a 3-point game. I would be shocked if Alabama blows the doors off Georgia.
Yeah.
With that being said, just going into this championship weekend, a lot can happen. I mean, everyone thinks the playoff is settled, but there can be a lot of chaos. What if Clemson loses to Pitt? What if Ohio State loses to Northwestern? Oklahoma loses? So what do you think could happen if chaos ensues and all the favorites lose this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, it would be total chaos, right? Clemson, you assume they're going to beat Pitt. Pitt really hasn't proven anything. Clemson is the number 2 strong team. So let's assume they get in. They're probably going to be 2 for sure. They should win. But the Oklahoma and Ohio State are going to just be crazy. If they don't win, and if Georgia doesn't win, like, what happens there?
Well, I think, Notre Dame's already in.
Yeah, they're a lock.
They're 12-0. They're going to finish as the 3 seed. I see in any other universe, I just don't see Pitt beating Clemson. Like, Clemson is going to kill them. Pitt scored 3 points against a 7-5 Miami team this past weekend. Clemson's going to blow the doors off of Pitt. I'd be shocked if it was a close game by halftime. So Clemson should be in. And I think it depends, like I said, Big 10 and Big 12. I think if one of those two teams loses and Alabama loses, they could still find themselves in possibly. But I think really the only game that's up for grabs is the Big 12. I just don't think Northwestern has the athletes or the talent to be able to compete with Ohio State. But Oklahoma and Texas, that could be a shootout. So that could go either way. But, you never know. That's why you have to play the game. You have to go out there and actually play. But I don't see a lot of potential chaos occurring unless Alabama loses and then Ohio State and Oklahoma win. Then what do you do for that last spot? That's going to be but that's why these people are on the committee. They're getting paid top dollar to make these tough decisions.
Exactly. You never know what the committee is going to decide. So, let them do it. But Alabama, it's hard for them not to be in it just because they've been so good, regardless win or loss. Ohio State, you assume they're going to come out and be the same team that they were just against Michigan, so you think they win again. Oklahoma favored, you think they beat Texas. But, if it doesn't happen, good luck to the people picking.
So we mentioned chaos, and we kind of want to segue. Well, I'll segue into this. Central Florida. Apparently I guess I was living under a rock past couple years, but apparently they were the national champions last year. I just didn't realize it.
Yeah, I didn't get that one either. No.
They've won 23 straight games. They're playing in their conference championship game this weekend against Memphis. It's unfortunate for them. They lost their star quarterback, Mackenzie Milton, to a devastating leg injury. Not sure if that's career-ending or not, but it looked really bad when I saw it. They were able to rally and beat South Florida. There's no way they have any shot at getting in. It's a great story. They still have to win their game, but even if Georgia, Ohio State, Oklahoma, and Clemson all lost, those 4 teams are way better than Central Florida. And, we get into this debate about most deserving versus the best teams, and they're not one of the best 4 teams. Maybe you can make an argument for them being deserving because they've had this 2-year great run, but it's going to be a struggle for them just to beat Memphis at home in the conference title game, even with a week to prepare with their backup quarterback and a lot of emotion going on that side of the field. They'll finish in the top 10, possibly the top 7 in the rankings, but there's no way they're going to get in, even if all the favorites lose this week. It's just not possible.
Yeah, I think we have to commend them on the season they had. They're done great, but they haven't played anyone to be worthy of being in the playoffs. But, great job to them for having the record. And you mentioned the quarterback, terrible injury. So you assume they're going to come out and really fight for their quarterback, hopefully win the game for him. But still just not going to be enough for them to be in the playoffs when there's 6 other teams that are much better.
So we'll go into our final talking point. I want to get your take on this first. Who do you think has the most to gain this weekend?
I think it's going to be Ohio State. I think 'cause they had that rough loss to Purdue. Everyone's sort of doubting them, is Ohio State going to perform this week? And they just had that huge win against Michigan. So, expectations are high for them. So if they can get another win, that's huge for them and their points going into the playoffs. I'm
going to go a little bit unconventional here. I don't think most people would expect this, but I think Clemson has the most to win the game this weekend. Listen, they're going to beat Pitt, all right? I think we all know that. I'd be shocked. I think everyone would be shocked if it was even a 10-point game by the 4th quarter. But if Alabama loses, Clemson will jump to the 1 spot, and they were there at this time last year. And listen, I really believe that Alabama shouldn't have made the playoff last year. I was not a huge Ohio State fan. I don't like Urban Meyer, but I believe they should have gone in over Alabama last year. My argument was last year, if you're really one of the best 4 teams in the country, how can you not even play in your own conference championship game, much less win it? That was my problem with Alabama last year. This year, the same thing applies. If they're really one of the best 4 teams, and I know they're going up against another really good team in Georgia, but if you can't even win your own conference, you don't deserve to play for a national championship game. So if Clemson wins and Alabama's left out, Clemson's the best team in the field. with 4 first-round picks on their defensive line, with a star freshman quarterback, I mean, they have all the ingredients for a victory. I'm not saying Oklahoma, Ohio State, Georgia, or Notre Dame won't give them a run, but Clemson will be by far the favorites, and they won't have to deal with Nick Saban, who has beaten Clemson 3 years. So I think that would be huge for them if they don't have to deal with Alabama.
Mm-hmm. I see your point, and the Alabama thing not being in the conference championship last year, really, that's almost not fair. Mm-hmm. But going along with who has the most to lose, based on your points, I see Alabama as having the most to lose. Everyone expects them to win. They're the number 1 seed, Nick Saban, all this Alabama hype. If they don't win the conference, I mean, it's almost like a disappointment because they've set the bar so high.
Mm-hmm. I think the most to lose is the team that's already in the playoff field, Notre Dame. Notre Dame, out of all the 6 teams that are in the playoff conversation, I think Notre Dame is by far the worst team. So I think Notre Dame is hoping they don't have to play Clemson, because I think Clemson will blow the brakes off Notre Dame. I don't even think that game will be competitive. They're hoping they can play a team like Ohio State, Oklahoma, maybe even Georgia. But like I said, I think any of these 5 teams could easily beat Notre Dame. So I think Notre Dame is trying to hope for the best potential matchup. But if Notre Dame plays Georgia, Alabama, or Clemson, which is most likely going to be their competition, I just don't see them beating any of those 3 teams. So Notre Dame's hoping they can play an Oklahoma team with no defense and an Ohio State team with a very marginal defense, and hope they can win in a shootout. Otherwise, those other 3 teams will just control the game, and Notre Dame will not even sniff a victory.
Yeah, Notre Dame, I think, benefited really well from not playing in a conference championship because they were able to end undefeated, this great thing. But you're right, like, who did they really play to make them like this great team? And they're not playing a conference championship game, so they're done. Like, you have to, conference championships about the 2 best teams playing. They're not playing anybody else.
And remember, everyone was talking about, oh, Notre Dame's huge victory over Michigan. That win doesn't look so good right now after they lost to Ohio State by almost 30 points. So, so when we come back, Jack McNicholas will give you his thoughts on the NFL season.
With 5 games remaining in the regular season and the playoff picture starting to take shape, there are plenty of teams that can finish out the season and keep their playoff hopes alive. I believe that with the 6 teams that will represent the AFC and the NFC can make this year's playoffs shape out to be one of the best we've seen in recent years. Now, starting with the AFC, with the first seed, my prediction for the playoffs will be the Kansas City Chiefs. I believe that when playoff time comes around, the Kansas City Chiefs will sit atop that AFC playoff bracket because they are currently coming out of that Week 13 bye. As we were going into Week 13, we have them coming off a loss in the Monday night shootout to the Rams. Despite that loss, they are currently sitting atop of this AFC with a 9-2, with some of the best performances we've seen all regular season so far. By the way, they can make plays with their second-year quarterback and first-year full-time starter quarterback Patrick Mahomes. With the weapons such as Kareem Hunt and Travis Kelce, as well as Tyreek Hill, I believe that they will finish with the best team going into the postseason in the AFC. Now, with the second seed, I have the New England Patriots. They will be the second seed because they have an easy division and Tom Brady is looking for his 16th division title. Although they play the Vikings, Jets, Bills, Dolphins, and Steelers, I see the Pats coming out with at least 3 of those victories, which should put them at 11 wins. I don't see any other AFC team getting 11 wins this season, which should put them at my second seed in the AFC. The third seed, the Houston Texans, they have found a stride right now, claiming 8 straight victories after starting 0-3, winning their division against the divisional rival on Monday, the Tennessee Titans. I believe that the Texans have enough wins to maintain the lead over the Colts in the AFC South. I believe that as long as they rely on their defense to keep them in games, as well as Deshaun Watson and DeAndre Hopkins, making sure they score points and keeping the points on the board, and as my third seed, they'll keep it right hot into the postseason. With the fourth seed, the Steelers having a loss this past weekend to the Denver Broncos, it seems as though the Steelers don't have anything to worry about. The Ravens are relying on a system quarterback with Lamar Jackson and right in need of getting on the right side of the learning curve in his rookie year. Now, I think that with the injury to Bengals quarterback Andy Dalton, the AFC North seems to be in favor of the Pittsburgh Steelers. If they can keep their success that they have found this season and rely more on the offense of heavily used first-year starter James Conner, I believe that they will have an accessibly road to the playoffs. But with the Steelers, one question always remains, once they get in, how far do they go? Now, With the 5th seed, the Los Angeles Chargers. If the Los Angeles Chargers were not in the same division in the AFC West as the powerhouse Chiefs, they could have a chance to take on any other division. I believe they will represent as the 5th seed in the AFC this year in the first wild card. They're firing on all cylinders. Although Melvin Gordon was a little banged up during their meeting with the Cardinals this past Sunday, backup running back Austin Eckler is doing a good job in a complimentary role. And I believe that he can complement Phillip Rivers, who was absolutely on fire this past weekend. And I believe that the Chargers proved this year that they are a force to be reckoned with, and they are my 5th seed. Now, the 6th seed in the AFC, my last, will have to go to the Indianapolis Colts. With Andrew Luck this season is making evidence that the Colts have to make a run at the playoffs. In the AFC South, you have the Texans sitting atop that division for now, but you must look at the impact that Coach Frank Reich is having as a new coach in his first year, who has helped the team take a new approach and believe that his system can help them succeed. The 6th seed can now be determined between the Colts and the Ravens, but I don't see the Ravens continuing success with Lamar Jackson at the helm. The Colts have a lot of young talent, and they've been doing much better this season with their franchise quarterback back at the helm, Andrew Luck. That's why they are my 6th seed in the AFC playoffs and my second wild card. And for the NFC, we have the 1st seed New Orleans Saints. Now, the Saints have been one of the most exciting offenses not named Kansas City this year. They sit 10-1 atop the AFC South, and Drew Brees is having an MVP-type season with 3,135 yards and only 29 touchdowns and only 2 interceptions on the season so far, making it evident that he's utilizing all of his weapons to create success on offense, as well as the defense led by Cam Jordan. There are many factors that the Saints mainly focus on this great season, but it's all based around Drew Brees and his weapons such as Michael Thomas and his 2 trusted running backs, Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara. I believe that when they top the NFC at the end of the season, once the season will come to a close. They're my 1st seed. To follow them, I have the 2nd seed of the Los Angeles Rams. I think they have a shot to be the 1st seed, but for the purposes that if they were to finish the same record with the Saints, the head-to-head matchup wouldn't fall into their favor. They have the advantage over the Rams due to that defeat earlier in the season, and the Rams have been a powerhouse as well, taking over the NFC this season and their division. They have been so successful under Coach Sean McVay's system and behind another MVP candidate in Todd Gurley, as well as receiving threats Robert Woods, Brandon Cooks. Jared Goff has all the tools to lead the Rams deep into the playoffs as the 2nd seed. I believe the NFC playoffs go through New Orleans, though. Now, my 3rd seed would be the Chicago Bears. If you told me that the Bears are going to win the NFC North over the Packers or the Vikings this season, I would not have believed you. With the trade made by the team for Khalil Mack seeming to pay off and their increased defense this year immensely from last season, people every year say that defense wins championships, but I don't think that the Bears are a deep playoff contender. But they have also proved me wrong in the beginning of the season from where I thought they would be. Now the question lies that as the 3rd seed, if they were to have their first-round playoff game at home, do they have the advantage there in the Monsters of the Midway? But they could be a shocker for the playoffs since the Vikings and the Packers have not done as well as we had expected this season. Now, with the 4th seed, we have the Dallas Cowboys representing the NFC East, and after a large performance actually on Thanksgiving, the Cowboys have taken down the Redskins and taken control of the NFC East, which is more looking like the NFC least this year, as the Giants and Eagles are not having the season that we as the fans were expecting from either team. The Redskins, who could have taken the division if not for the devastating injury to quarterback Alex Smith, are now relying on backup Colt McCoy. The Cowboys will have to rely on Ezekiel Elliott for the next 5 games, hoping that they can take this 4th seed in the NFC. The 5th seed, I have the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings have had some trouble with the new adjustments having Kirk Cousins at the helm. With the emergence of the Chicago Bears in the NFC North, it may be a tough road for the rest of the season for the Vikes, but the Vikings defense led by Anthony Barr, Harrison Smith, and Linval Joseph, the Vikings will get there. The problem solved that they have to have the next coming weeks, I believe they'll make a strong push-off for the 5th seed in the NFC playoff bracket. Now in a tight NFC race, we have the 6th seed Carolina Panthers. With Superman as your quarterback, anything's possible, right? I believe that although the Panthers have the top-seeded Saints 2 times in the next 5 weeks, which will both be high-pressure affairs for both teams, the Panthers find themselves in a close loss last Sunday to the Seattle Seahawks. I believe there is a high chance the Panthers can win out of the 3 of the next 5 and find themselves slipping into the 6th seed. Those are my playoff predictions for this NFL season, and I think that with different outcomes that can occur in the next 5 weeks, these 12 teams are definitely the highest probable playoff predictions in my mind. Back to you guys at the desk.
Thanks to my man Jack. Now on to our games of the week. Number 4 Georgia versus number 1 Alabama. This is the rematch everyone has been waiting for since last January. But this will not be the same game between Georgia and Alabama, as the winner heads to the college football playoff and the loser hopes for chaos to possibly still get in. Both teams are much different, with Alabama quarterback Tua Tagovailoa being the full-time starter and not a backup, and Georgia's Jake Fromm having led the country in QBR the last 4 weeks, while also having more of a command of the offense. Both of these teams are very similar statistically, which is why anyone who thinks Alabama will barrel over Georgia is simply naive. Both teams have a top 15 scoring and total offense, while also being top 5 in passing efficiency, top 10 in third down conversion percentage, top 10 in scoring defense, and top 15 in passing yards allowed per game. While Alabama is favored in most of these statistics, Georgia's not lagging far behind. Most of the Georgia players in this game still have not forgotten what happened last time these two teams met, and that could play to their advantage. Georgia will have more fans in the building, despite this being a neutral site game, and Georgia will stick to what they're good at, running the football. Georgia has the best rushing offense in the SEC this season, with over 250 yards per game, and is led by last year's version of Nick Chubb and Sony Michel, and their Thunder and Lightning, and DeAndre Swift and Elijah Holyfield, while Alabama is not nearly as strong running the football this season. Fromm also gaining more experience these past 2 years will help the talented offense. And remember, as good as Tua has been, he's barely played in the fourth quarter all season. So if this is a close game, which it should be, everyone will find out what Tua is made of. The kicking game will also be important, and Georgia clearly has the better kicker in Rodrigo Hot Rod Blankenship, as he's gone 19 of 22 on the season. Kirby Smart will have his team ready to play, and there's nothing more dangerous than a team playing with nothing to lose and everything to gain. Georgia will play its best game of the season and punch its ticket to the playoff. Georgia 30, Alabama 27.
You're going to want to catch this one. Thursday at 8 o'clock, Kevin Durant and the defending NBA champs take on Kawhi Leonard and the Raptors. The Warriors are currently working out a few issues on the court, and Steph Curry is still nursing an injury, so they haven't quite been the Warriors we're used to. But they're only in second place, so don't worry. Even with their issues and injuries, they have 5 All-Stars on the roster, so there's certainly enough talent to keep the Warriors competitive until they're back at full strength. So you think the Warriors will claim the West once again and head to the finals. But against who? The Raptors, led by Kawhi, sit in first place in the East and are looking like a major title contender. So this could be a potential championship preview, so get ready. That's all we have for this week. I'm Paige Krikorian, and he's Corey Grip. We'll see you next time.
Go Dogs!